Rain hit the ambulance bay in sheets, hard enough to blur the red exit sign into a smear of color through the glass doors. Stacy had been on shift for 11 hours. Her scrubs were stiff with someone else's blood from a car wreck 2 hours ago. Her feet ached in a way that had stopped registering as pain and started registering as background noise, and the coffee in her hand had gone cold sometime around midnight. She didn't look up when the doors slammed open. She looked up when she heard the footsteps. 4 men in black coats, moving in the same rhythm, boots striking the tile like a single set of feet instead of 8. No shouting, no panic, just a gurney pushed straight past triage, past the check-in desk, past every protocol the hospital had ever written down. "Hey," Stacy started, already stepping into their path. "You can't just—" Then she saw him. The man on the gurney had one hand pressed flat to his own ribs, blood soaking dark through his fingers, and his jaw was clenched so tight a muscle ticked under his cheekbone. He wasn't groaning. He wasn't gripping the rail like a man in agony. His eyes moved across the room in one slow pass. Door, window, staff, exits. The way a person catalogs danger, not the way a person catalogs pain. Then the ring caught the light. Heavy gold, a crest worn smooth at the edges, dark red crusted into the grooves where it met his finger. Stacy's stomach dropped an inch. She'd grown up hearing her mother lower her voice around men who wore rings like that, men whose names weren't supposed to end up in a police report or a hospital chart. She was too tired for this, too tired to pretend she hadn't clocked exactly what she was looking at. She stepped toward the gurney anyway. If you're already feeling the tension in this room, hit subscribe before the lockdown doors seal shut, because what Stacy does in the next 60 seconds changes everything. Drop a comment right now. Would you have helped him, or called security? Let's see how many of you make it to the end still on his side. "Get him into Bay 4, Stacy said, snapping on gloves before anyone could stop her. Now. Grace, the charge nurse, hovered near the desk, eyes darting to the men in black filling the doorway. "Stacy, we need ID. We need intake. We need him not to die on my floor. Everything else waits." She cut his shirt away, and the wound underneath told her more than a chart ever would. 1 entry, no exit, close range, angled up under the ribs, missing the parts that would have killed him outright by less than an inch. That wasn't luck. Someone had wanted him alive when the trigger got pulled. "Who did this?" she asked, pressing gauze to the wound, watching his face instead of her own hands. He didn't answer in words. What came out was low, clipped, half in a language she didn't speak, 3 syllables aimed at the man standing closest to the gurney, who stiffened and said nothing back. Coded, rehearsed, trained into him by people who never said anything a stranger could repeat. Stacy's pulse ticked up. She kept her hands steady anyway. 11 years of night shifts had taught her that panic in her fingers meant panic in the patient. "I asked you a question," she said. "You did." His eyes cut to hers. His voice was rough, controlled, each word placed like he'd chosen it before it left his mouth. "I'm not going to answer it." She should call it in. She knew that the second the thought crossed her mind, knew it the way she knew how to find a vein blind, how to read a crashing heart rate off a monitor without looking. A man wheeled in by armed strangers off the books with a ring like that on his hand was not her problem to keep quiet. She reached for the intake chart anyway and left the name field blank. "Get the rest of them out of my ER, she said, louder now, to no one and everyone. "I'm not stitching him up with an audience." "They stay," the nearest man said. "Then he bleeds out while you all stand there. Your call." Silence stretched between them. Not empty, but charged, 4 sets of eyes weighing whether to test her. Then the wounded man lifted 2 fingers off the gurney rail, barely, and the others filed out into the hallway, taking up position on either side of the door like they'd never planned to leave at all. Stacy exhaled through her teeth. "Better. You didn't have to do that," he said. "I didn't do it for you." She threaded the needle, hands finally steady enough to work clean. I did it because I can't have 4 armed men breathing down my neck while I try to keep you from dying on my table. Fair. She caught herself glancing at the ring again and forced her eyes back to the wound. He noticed anyway. You know what this means, he said. Not a question. I know what it's supposed to mean. She tied off the first stitch. I don't care what family owns you, or what that ring says about who you answer to. In this room, you're a body with a hole in it. That's the only thing that's true right now. His eyes narrowed just slightly. Not gratitude, not relief. The look of a man recalculating something he hadn't accounted for. Most people care, he said. Most people haven't watched someone die from fear before the injury finished the job. She reached for the second round of gauze. So breathe slow, answer nothing, and let me work. That's the deal. He studied her face like he was memorizing it. Lee Soo-ho. I didn't ask for a name. You were going to. She didn't confirm it. She didn't have to. The overhead speaker cracked with a security announcement. Lockdown code. All units hold position. Doors sealing floor by floor. Stacy's hands went still over the wound for exactly 1 second before she made herself keep moving. They found the building, Soo-ho said quietly. Not a guess. Who found the building? He didn't answer that one either. His eyes went to the door, and his jaw locked tighter than it had been since he'd arrived. Footsteps echoed down the corridor outside. Fast, even, too coordinated to be hospital staff running a code. Grace's voice cracked over the radio. Stacy, there are men on 3 asking for a patient under 3 different names, and security isn't stopping them. Stacy looked down at the blood soaking through her second layer of gauze faster than she could replace it, at the blank name field on a chart she was never supposed to leave blank, and understood, in the space of one breath, that stitching his wound closed had just become the least dangerous thing happening in this hospital. There's a service corridor behind supply, she said, already pulling the IV line free. Nobody uses it. It connects straight to the loading dock. His eyes locked onto hers. Why are you helping me? She didn't have an answer that made sense. Not with his blood drying on her gloves. Not with 4 strangers hunting him through her floor. Not with her own name about to end up next to his on a hospital record, if anyone ever pulled the footage. Ask me after we survive the next 5 minutes, she said, and pulled him off the table. The footsteps outside Bay 4 stopped. The door handle turned. The door swung open on a nurse pushing a crash cart, oblivious, already 3 steps past them before she registered the blood on the floor. Move, Stacy hissed, and hauled Soo-ho off the gurney and through the side exit before the woman finished turning around. He staggered, one hand clamped over his ribs, the fresh stitches pulling with every step. Stacy got his arm over her shoulder, felt the heat of him through the thin hospital gown, felt his weight sag against her side for 1 full second before he forced himself upright again. You're going to tear the sutures, she said. Better than a bullet. The supply room smelled like bleach and cardboard. Stacy shoved a shelving unit aside, exposed a door painted the same gray as the wall, and pulled it open onto a corridor no wider than her shoulders. Pipes ran along the ceiling. A single bulb flickered 40 feet down. How do you know about this? Soo-ho asked. I smoke on my break. Nobody else knows this floor better than the people hiding from their supervisors. His mouth twitched, almost a laugh, cut off when his ribs reminded him laughing wasn't free right now. Behind them, muffled through the supply room door, a voice barked orders in the same clipped rhythm Soo-ho had used earlier. Footsteps. Fast. Close. They're in the ward, she whispered. Then walk faster. They moved together down the corridor, her shoulder braced under his arm, his blood soaking warm through her scrub top, where his side pressed against her. The bulb overhead buzzed and died as they passed under it, dropping them into a stretch of dark lit, only by the red glow of an exit sign 30 feet ahead. A door slammed somewhere behind them. Soo-ho's hand closed around her wrist, hard, stopping her mid-step. Wait. We don't have time to listen. She listened. Footsteps, closer than they should have been, echoing off the pipes in a way that made it impossible to tell which direction they came from. Suho pulled her sideways into a recessed doorway, his chest against her back, his breath uneven and hot near her ear, one arm braced across her collarbone like a seatbelt. Neither of them moved. The footsteps passed the mouth of the corridor and kept going, fading toward the east wing. Suho didn't let go right away. Stacy felt his heartbeat against her spine, too fast for a man who'd spent the last 20 minutes acting like nothing touched him. "You can let go now," she said quietly. "I know he didn't." She turned inside the small space, close enough that she had to tip her head back to hold his eyes, close enough to see the sweat at his hairline, the blood drying dark along his jaw, where he must have wiped his own face without noticing. "Why are they hunting you in a hospital?" she asked. "In a building full of witnesses? Because whoever sent them doesn't care about witnesses." His voice dropped lower. "They care about finishing what they started, which is..." He looked at her for a long moment, like he was deciding how much of the truth he could afford to spend. "You should stop asking questions you don't want answered." Too late for that. Something in his face shifted, not softening exactly, but losing an edge of its usual control. His hand came up, hovered near her jaw without touching, close enough that she felt the warmth off his palm. The exit door at the end of the corridor banged open. Suho's hand dropped. Whatever had almost happened folded itself back into the dark. "Loading dock," Stacy said, pulse hammering for reasons that had nothing to do with the footsteps anymore. 200 feet, go. They ran. The rain hit them the second the dock door gave way, cold and immediate, soaking through her scrubs in seconds. A black car idled at the curb with its headlights off. Suho stopped at the edge of the dock, turned back to her, with water streaming down his face, blood still dark across his shirt. "They'll ask you questions," he said, "about tonight." "I'll lie. They'll know. Let them." She wiped rain out of her eyes. "Go before your ride leaves without you." He didn't move yet. "I don't know your last name." "You're not getting it." The corner of his mouth pulled up despite everything. He turned toward the car, one hand still pressed to his ribs, and stopped again halfway there. "I'll find it anyway," he said. "I already know your face." The car door shut behind him. Taillights disappeared into the rain. Stacy stood on the dock for a long moment before she noticed her hands were shaking. Then her phone buzzed in her scrub pocket. Unknown number. A single message lit the screen. "Check your left coat pocket before your shift ends." She hadn't given him her number. She hadn't seen him touch her coat. Her hand was already moving toward the locker room before she finished deciding to go. The coat pocket held a folded scrap of paper and nothing else. No name, no signature, just 7 digits and 3 words. "Burn after reading." Stacy didn't burn it. She memorized it and shredded it in the paper cutter by the nurse's station instead, telling herself that was close enough. 3 days passed before she used the number. 3 days of double shifts. Of Grace asking careful questions she didn't answer, of catching herself checking the ambulance bay every time the doors opened. On the 4th night, she stood in the stairwell during her break, phone in hand, and typed 4 words before she could talk herself out of it. "Are you still breathing?" The reply came in under a minute. "Barely. You did good work. I didn't do it for a compliment. I know. That's why it mattered." She stared at the screen longer than she meant to, then typed the question that had been sitting under her ribs for 3 days. "Why did they want you dead in a hospital full of cameras?" The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Because the person who shot me isn't a stranger. Strangers don't know which artery to miss." Stacy's stomach turned cold. "Someone you know shot you. Someone I trusted. Who?" No answer. The typing indicator blinked once and vanished. He showed up 2 nights later, no warning, standing outside the staff entrance in a black coat with the collar turned up against the rain, alone this time. No men flanking him, no gurney, just him on his own 2 feet, upright, healing. "You shouldn't be here," Stacy said, stepping outside to meet him before anyone saw. I know. That's not an answer. I wanted to see your face without a wound between us. He said it plainly, no weight behind it, like he was reporting a fact instead of confessing something. That's the only reason I have. Stacy crossed her arms against the cold. You said someone you trusted shot you. I did. Are you going to tell me who? No. He held her eyes when he said it, no apology in his face. Not because I don't trust you, because the more you know, the more dangerous it is for you to know it. I already know enough to get fired if anyone finds that missing chart. I know. I'm sorry for that. He said it fast, low, like the words cost him something to hand over. I didn't think about what it would mean for you. I was bleeding, and you were the only person in the building who looked at me like a person instead of a target. Stacy studied his face in the security light over the door, sharper now than it had looked under fluorescence, the exhaustion mostly gone, replaced by something coiled and careful. Your family's looking for you, she said. Not a question. My family's looking for the person who shot me. I'm the evidence. His jaw tightened. That makes both of us targets, depending on who finds me first. That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be. A car passed on the street behind him, slowed, kept going. Suho's eyes tracked it the entire time without turning his head, some instinct in him that never fully switched off. You need to go somewhere I'm not associated with, Stacy said. Whoever's hunting you already knows my hospital. They probably know my name by now. They do. He said it flatly, like he'd been waiting to see if she'd figure that out on her own. That's actually why I'm here. I need you to know what you walked into before it gets worse. Stacy's arms tightened across her chest. How much worse? Suho reached into his coat and produced a photograph, worn soft at the corners like it had been carried a long time. He held it out to her, and for a moment neither of them moved, the rain filling the silence between his hand and hers. Before you look at this, he said, I need you to understand, I didn't know who you were connected to until 2 days ago. Stacy took the photograph. Her father looked back at her from 12 years in the past, standing beside a younger version of the same men who'd wheeled Suho into her ER. The photograph shook in her hand, hard enough that the image blurred. Where did you get this? Stacy said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt, which surprised her. My father's private files. Suho watched her face instead of the photo. I found it while I was trying to figure out who set me up. That's my father. I know. You knew before you showed me. It wasn't a question, and the accusation in it landed exactly where she meant it to. I suspected. He held up both hands, not defensive exactly, more like a man showing he wasn't hiding anything else. Your last name matched a name in the file. I didn't confirm it was your father until I saw your face next to his in a hospital badge photo on your ID. You looked me up. Of course I looked you up. You hid me from armed men in your own hospital. I needed to know why. Stacy's throat tightened around words that didn't want to come out clean. My father disappeared when I was 16. No note. No body. The police called it a voluntary disappearance and closed the file in 4 months. It wasn't voluntary. The rain had eased to a drizzle, and the parking lot lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a flat yellow that made the photograph look older than it was. Stacy stared at her father's face, younger, unworried, standing at ease beside men who very clearly weren't strangers to him. What was he to your family? She asked. I don't know yet. The file doesn't say. It just has his name, that photograph, and a date. Suho's voice had gone careful, like he was picking each word to avoid causing more damage than necessary. The date is 6 months before he disappeared. Stacy's hand closed around the photograph before she caught herself and made herself loosen her grip so it wouldn't crease. You're telling me my father was involved with the same people who just tried to kill you. I'm telling you I don't know the shape of it yet. But yes, involved, somehow. She looked up at him, searching his face for the calculation she'd caught earlier, the sense that he was managing her instead of talking to her. She didn't find it. What she found instead was a man watching her absorb something he clearly hadn't wanted to be the one to hand her. "Why tell me this at all?" she said. "You could have kept it, disappeared, left me out of it completely, because you already put yourself in it, the second you hid me, instead of calling security." His voice roughened. "And because I don't want to be one more person in your life who knew something about your father and let you keep believing he just walked away." The admission sat between them, heavier than either of them seemed prepared for. Stacy became aware of how close he'd stepped without her noticing, close enough that the rain had stopped being the only thing making her skin feel too tight. "I need to think," she said. "Take the time you need. I don't trust easily. I especially don't trust men who show up outside my hospital with photographs that turn my whole life into a lie. I'm not asking you to trust me." He held her eyes, steady, no retreat in it. "I'm asking you to let me help you find out what happened to him. That's all I have to offer right now." A car door slammed somewhere across the lot. Suho's attention snapped toward the sound instantly, body angling half in front of her before he seemed to catch himself doing it. "You need to go inside," he said, voice dropping to something urgent. "Now." "Why?" "Because that's the second time tonight a car has slowed down near this door. And the first time I let it go, because I told myself I was being paranoid." He was already moving her backward toward the staff entrance, one hand light at her waist, eyes never leaving the lot. "I don't get to be wrong about this twice." The car's headlights flicked on. The headlights swept the lot once, slow, deliberate, then died again. "Inside," Ho said, and didn't wait for her to argue. He got her through the staff door and pressed his back against it, one arm braced across the frame, watching the parking lot through the narrow window until the car finally pulled away into traffic. "That could have been anyone," Stacy said, breathless, her back against the cool tile of the corridor. "It wasn't anyone. It circled twice." He exhaled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders now that the door was shut and locked. "I need to leave before it comes back with company. You just told me my father might be tied to whatever's hunting you, and now you're leaving?" "I'm leaving so it doesn't find you standing next to me." His eyes softened, just slightly, at the edges. "I'll find another way to reach you. I promise you that much." He was gone before she could answer, out through the side door into the dark, and Stacy stood alone in the corridor with her pulse still hammering and her father's face burning behind her eyes. She didn't sleep that night. She spent it in the hospital's records archive instead, pulling old newspaper clippings on a database she wasn't technically supposed to have access to, searching her father's name against every keyword she could think of: cargo, shipping, import, the vague industry he'd claimed to work in before he vanished. At 4 in the morning, she found it. A single archived article, 11 years old, about a warehouse fire that killed 2 men and injured a third. Her father's name wasn't in the article, but the third name on the injured list was Lee Jun-ho, Suho's father. Stacy sat back from the monitor, the fluorescent light overhead suddenly too loud, too bright, pressing in on her skull. She read the article 3 more times, searching for a detail she'd missed, some proof it was a different Lee, a coincidence, a name shared by half a country. There wasn't one. The article named the warehouse. It was owned, at the time, by a shipping company registered under 3 names, one of which matched a business card she'd found tucked in her father's coat pocket the week before he disappeared, a card she'd kept in a drawer for 12 years without ever looking closely enough to read the fine print. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. The same one from before. "Are you awake?" she typed with shaking hands. "Your father and mine were at the same warehouse fire 11 years ago." The reply took almost a full minute this time. "That's not possible. My father has never mentioned a fire. I have the article. I have the business card. I have everything except an explanation." Another long pause. Then, "Don't go looking for more on your own. Whatever this is, it's bigger than a coincidence, and the people protecting it have already tried to kill me once. So what do I do instead? Meet me. Tomorrow night." Somewhere no one's looking for either of us. Stacy stared at the screen, the archive light humming above her, her father's business card sitting cold and worn in her palm. Where? She typed. The 3 dots blinked for a long time before his answer came through. Somewhere I should have told you about from the start. The address led her to a shuttered restaurant 2 blocks from the harbor. Dark windows. A chain looped through the door handles like it had been closed for years. Suho waited inside. A single lamp burning on a table pushed against the back wall. Papers spread across it in careful rows. You own this place, Stacy said, taking in the dust, the stacked chairs, the smell of salt and old wood. My family owns this place. I used to hide here as a kid, when I didn't want to be found. He didn't look up from the papers. It felt right to bring you somewhere I actually chose, for once. She crossed to the table. The papers were financial records, shipping manifests, names crossed out and circled in red ink that wasn't his handwriting. Whose are these? My uncle's. I took them from his office 2 hours ago, which means by morning he'll know they're missing, which means we don't have much time. He finally looked up at her, and there was something rawer in his face than she'd seen before. Less control, more exhaustion. Your father wasn't just at that warehouse, Stacy. He worked for my family. Quietly, for almost 2 years before the fire. The floor seemed to tilt under her. Doing what? Moving money, making it disappear into accounts that couldn't be traced back to us. Suho's jaw tightened. The fire wasn't an accident. Someone set it to destroy evidence of exactly what your father was helping hide. My father survived. The other 2 men didn't. And your father disappeared 6 months later. Suho slid one of the papers toward her. A ledger page, a name she recognized in faded ink. I think he knew too much to be allowed to stay. I think someone decided the safest version of him was a version that had vanished. Stacy's hands curled into fists on the table's edge. You're saying someone in your family did this to him. I'm saying I don't know which someone yet. That's the part I haven't told you. His voice dropped, guilt threading through the control he usually kept so tight. I've suspected for 2 days that whoever set me up, and whoever erased your father, are the same person. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to hand you a theory dressed up as a fact. You should have told me the second you suspected it. I know. He didn't flinch from it. I was trying to protect you from a guess that might have been wrong. I see now that wasn't fair to you. Stacy paced away from the table, arms wrapped around herself, the restaurant's shadows swallowing the edges of the room. 12 years. 12 years I thought he left because of something I did. Something about our family. Not this. It was never about you. You don't know that. I know enough. Suho crossed the space between them, stopping close but not touching, giving her the room she hadn't asked for but clearly needed. Whatever happened to him, it wasn't because of anything you did wrong. Men like the ones in my family don't erase people over small things. They erase people who threaten what keeps the whole structure standing. Stacy looked up at him, anger and grief tangled too tightly to separate. And you're one of those men. The words landed harder than she meant them to. Suho's face didn't change, but something behind his eyes went very still. I'm the version of that family who's currently bleeding through a stitched wound because I asked the wrong question to the wrong person, he said quietly. I'm not asking you to forgive what my family did. I'm asking you to let me help you find out exactly what it was. Stacy didn't answer right away. Outside, a car door shut somewhere near the harbor, too far to be certain, too close to ignore. Suho's head turned toward the sound instantly, every ounce of vulnerability folding back into readiness. They tracked the papers, he said, already reaching for the ledger. We need to move. Now. They went out through the kitchen, Suho leading her past rusted equipment and a back door that opened onto an alley slick with harbor mist. He moved fast, despite the healing wound. One hand pressed briefly to his side before he shook it off and kept going. Who's out there? Stacy whispered. I don't know yet. That's what worries me. They ducked between two buildings as headlights swept the alley mouth, and Stacy found herself pressed against brick, with Suho's arm braced beside her head, his body shielding hers from the street, without either of them discussing it. His breath came fast near her temple, and for one suspended second, neither of them moved, the danger outside, somehow sharpening everything between them instead of erasing it. "I need you to look at something," he murmured, pulling the ledger page from his coat, angling it toward the thin light. "Before we lose the chance." Stacy scanned the circled names, the red ink cutting through columns of numbers. One name near the bottom had been circled twice, underlined hard enough to tear the paper. "Who is that?" she asked, pointing. Suho went very still. "That's my uncle's signature, beside the date of the fire. So he ordered it. Maybe. Or he's the one who covered for whoever did." Suho's voice had gone flat, controlled in the way it got when he was holding something back from his own face. "Either way, he's the person who's been hunting me since the hospital. He's the one who shot me." The headlights outside the alley slowed, then stopped. "He's here," Stacy breathed. "He's always been close. That's how he's stayed ahead of me this whole time." Suho folded the ledger and pushed it into her hands, instead of his own pocket. "Take this. If something happens to me, you need proof of what he did. To my family, to your father, to both of us. Don't talk like that." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being careful." His eyes found hers in the dark, urgent, stripped of the composure he usually wore like armor. "There's something I need to say, and I don't know if I'll get another quiet moment to say it. Suho, I wasn't looking for anyone when you pulled me off that gurney." His hand came up to her jaw, hesitant, like he expected her to pull away. "I've spent my whole life being careful about who gets close enough to use against me. I don't know how to be careful around you anymore, and it terrifies me more than the man outside this alley." Stacy's breath caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. Before she could answer, footsteps crunched against gravel at the alley's mouth, slow, unhurried, a man in no rush because he already believed he had them cornered. Suho's hand dropped from her face. His whole body shifted, coiled, angled toward the threat instead of her. "Stay behind me," he said. "Whatever happens next, stay behind me." The footsteps stopped 10 feet away. A voice, low and amused, spoke into the dark. "Suho, you always did hide in the places I taught you to hide in." The man who stepped into the thin light wore the same kind of coat as the guards from the hospital, but carried himself differently, older, unhurried, the posture of someone who had never once needed to rush toward violence because violence always arrived on his schedule. "Uncle," Suho said, voice level, one arm still angled protectively across Stacy's front. "You didn't need to come yourself. I didn't trust anyone else to finish it properly." His uncle's eyes slid to Stacy, assessing, cataloging her the way Suho had cataloged the ER on the night they met. "The nurse. I wondered when you'd bring her somewhere I could reach both of you at once. She's not part of this. She's been part of this since her father decided honesty was more important than his own survival." His uncle's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "You should ask her sometime what he told me, right before the fire." Stacy's chest went tight. "You were there. I started the fire, if we're being precise about it." He said it without weight, like reciting a fact from a ledger. "Your father threatened to go to the authorities with records that would have destroyed everything my brother built. I gave him a choice. He chose wrong. You killed him. I gave him the option to disappear instead of dying. He took it. The last I heard, he's still alive somewhere. He thinks I can't find him." His uncle's gaze flicked back to Suho, "Which is more mercy than I'm prepared to offer you tonight." Suho's hand found Stacy's wrist behind his back, a silent signal, and she felt his fingers press twice. A pattern, deliberate, though she had no idea what it meant until he spoke again. "If you wanted me dead, you'd have sent men instead of coming yourself," Suho said. "You're here because you want the ledger back before it reaches my father. I'm here because loose ends have a way of becoming expensive if they're left too long." His uncle's hand moved toward his coat. "Give me the papers, and I'll consider letting the nurse walk away untouched." "No," Stacy said, before Suho could answer for her. Both men looked at her. "My father's still alive," she said, the words shaking loose something furious and clear inside her chest. "You just told me that, which means you don't get to threaten me into silence anymore, because I finally have something to look for." Suho's fingers tightened once around her wrist, the same pattern as before, and this time she understood. "Move on, my signal. You always did raise complicated women, Suho," his uncle said, almost fond, reaching fully into his coat now. "Your mother would be disappointed in your taste." Suho moved first. He shoved Stacy sideways into the gap between the buildings, hard enough that she stumbled into the dark, and in the same motion swept the ledger from his own coat and hurled it, not at his uncle, but past him, toward the mouth of the alley, toward the street, toward the exact spot where a second car's headlights had just swung into view. "Run!" Suho shouted, already moving to meet his uncle head-on instead of following her. The gunshot cracked through the alley half a second later. Stacy didn't remember deciding to turn back. She remembered the sound of the shot, the way it seemed to stop her heart mid-beat, and then she was running toward it instead of away. Suho was on the ground, one hand pressed to his shoulder, blood already spreading dark through his coat. His uncle stood over him, gun still raised, the ledger crumpled uselessly at his feet where it had missed its intended target. "Don't," Stacy said, stepping into the light before she'd fully thought it through. "Don't you dare. You had 30 seconds to run when he told you to. He's not the only one who can make choices tonight." Her hands were steady, the same steadiness that had saved Suho's life on a hospital table 3 weeks ago, though everything underneath that steadiness was screaming, "You want the ledger. It's right there. Take it and go. And leave 2 witnesses standing?" "1 witness," Stacy said. "I destroy the copy I made tonight. I never say your name to anyone. I never say his name either, if that's what you're worried about." Her eyes flicked to Suho, blood pooling under his shoulder, his breathing already going shallow. "But you have to let me get him help right now, or you're not just killing a nephew. You're taking away the only thing standing between that ledger and every reporter in this city." His uncle's eyes narrowed, calculating the way Suho always did, and for a terrible second, Stacy thought she'd misjudged him completely. Then he lowered the gun. "You have 30 seconds to disappear," he said. "Both of you. If I see either of your faces again, the mercy ends." Stacy didn't wait for him to change his mind. She dropped to her knees beside Suho, hands already finding the wound, pressure applied before she'd consciously decided to move. "Stay with me," she said. "Look at me, not at him. Me." Suho's eyes found hers, glassy with blood loss but still sharp underneath it. "The ledger is his problem now. You're mine." She got an arm under him, hauling him up with strength she didn't know she still had left in her exhausted body. "We're getting you to a hospital that isn't mine, somewhere off the books, and then you're going to tell me everything you've been protecting me from since the night we met." "Everything? Every last piece of it." She half carried him toward the street, toward the sound of a car she prayed was Suho's driver, and not another one of his uncle's men. "I've spent 12 years not knowing what happened to my father. I'm done finding truth out one bloody piece at a time." The car that pulled up was his. His driver's face went white at the sight of them, and within seconds they were moving. Suho slumped against her shoulder, his hand finding hers, and holding on even as his eyes started to slide shut. "Stacy," he murmured, barely audible over the engine. "I'm here. When I said I didn't know how to be careful around you." His breath caught. Pain or something else. She couldn't tell anymore. "I meant it. I still mean it. Save it for when you're not bleeding on my hands again." The ghost of a smile crossed his face before the blood loss finally took him under. The private clinic Suho's people used was nothing like Stacy's hospital. No fluorescent lights, no lockdown announcements, just quiet rooms and a doctor who asked no questions and wrote no charts. Stacy stayed through the surgery, through the transfusion, through the long gray hours before dawn, when his color finally started coming back. He woke to find her in the chair beside his bed, still in blood-stiff scrubs, a folded piece of paper in her hands. "You didn't leave," he said, voice rough with sleep and painkillers. "I told you, you're mine until you finish explaining yourself." She held up the paper. "Your uncle's ledger. I made a second copy before I handed the original back to him. He doesn't know it exists." Suho went very still. "That could get you both of us killed. It could also be the only thing that ever finds my father." She set it on the table between them, careful, deliberate, the way she'd set down every piece of evidence in this entire nightmare. "I'm not asking you to fix what your family did. I'm asking you to help me finish what he started, before someone erased him for it. You could have handed that ledger over and walked away tonight. Gone back to a life that didn't have my family's blood all over it. I could have." She reached out, finally, and let her fingers rest against the back of his hand where the IV line ran into his skin. "I didn't want to." Suho turned his hand over slowly, lacing his fingers through hers, careful of the bruising down his arm. "My uncle could still come looking. Men like him don't let go easily. He also just watched me hand him back exactly what he wanted, with nothing left to gain from chasing us further." Stacy squeezed his hand. "I copied the ledger, but I'm not planning to use it as a weapon. I'm using it to find my father. That's a different fight than the one your uncle's afraid of." "You're certain of that?" "I'm certain enough to stop looking over my shoulder every 10 minutes. She held his gaze, steady despite the exhaustion pulling at every part of her. "I've spent my whole career keeping people alive, one crisis at a time. I'm done spending my life waiting for the next one to arrive. I want to build something instead of just surviving it." Outside the clinic window, the first gray light of morning broke over the harbor, thin and uncertain, promising nothing except that the night was finally over. 3 weeks later, the second copy of the ledger did exactly what Stacy had hoped it would. A quiet, careful search through old shipping records, guided by names Suho's father was finally willing to say out loud once his brother's crimes came to light, led her to a small coastal town 4 hours north, and to a man living under a different name who still kept an old photograph of a daughter he never stopped hoping would find him. Her father cried before she did. Stacy hadn't expected that. Suho stood back during the reunion, giving them the distance they needed, until her father looked past her shoulder and asked, quietly, who the man waiting by the car was. "Someone who helped me find you," Stacy said. "Someone I'm not planning on losing track of." Suho's uncle never came looking again. Whatever peace his family made internally after the truth surfaced, it kept itself far from Stacy's door, and further still from the small house near the harbor, where she and Suho started spending their days off together. No coded messages, no locked doors, no gurneys between them. 6 months after the night in the alley, Suho showed up at her apartment with takeout, a bottle of wine, and no injuries for the first time since she'd known him. "You're empty-handed," she said, opening the door. "No blood, no stitches needed. I'm trying something new." He held up the bag. "It's called a normal evening." Bold move. "I learned from the best." He stepped inside, and the door closed behind him on a life that finally had room in it for something quieter than survival. Stacy set the wine down on the counter and looked at him. Really looked. The way she hadn't let herself in the hospital that first night. Back when looking too closely felt like a risk she couldn't afford. "I'm glad you didn't die on my table," she said. "I'm glad you didn't let me." Outside, the city kept moving the way it always had, indifferent to the war that had almost cost them everything. Inside, for the first time since the night the doors of Bay 4 slammed open, neither of them was waiting for the next threat to walk through them. They were just two people, finally allowed to stay. If Stacy and Suho earned their happy ending in your eyes, let us know which chapter hit you hardest in the comments below. Subscribe for more forbidden, high-stakes love stories dropping every week. And share this one with someone who needs to believe love can survive anything. See you in the next story.